Hey guys, so this is part two of my tour. This is the four pigeons. These are the four pigeons who live in my bedroom, and I'll tell you their stories and why they live here. Some of them you're more familiar with. We've got Goldie, who came from the De Palma flock. For those of you unfamiliar, the De Palma flock lives in a palm, like this cluster of palm trees in the front yard of someone who first posted, who actually specifically asked me about this particular bird here. Um, they all live in this palm tree cluster, and Goldie here got stung by a bark scorpion. There are some bark scorpions in that particular area, so it wasn't a lethal poison, but it was painful and it locked her body up. She was mostly paralyzed except for, breathing, pooping, her vital functions, but she couldn't move. She was a little burrito. So I nursed her back to health till she could move again, and then let her back to her flock. And then apparently there was a big bully bird that specifically picked on her. Um, and the De Palma human noticed this but couldn't catch Goldie until she'd gotten really badly hurt. Also, the bully had been pushing her away from the food that their human was leaving out. So she was weak and couldn't fly away, and she trusted the human, so she parked herself on the human's doorstep and let her pick her up. There's a video of when I first got her back from, God, this is probably 6 months ago, maybe more. Her scalp had been punctured, and turns out one of the bones in her face had been cracked, and there was a lot of infection. So my wife and I spent, over the course of probably 3 weeks, every night we would kind of pull out more stuff from her face, kind of tend to her wounds. I mean, it was so bad that one of her eyes was closed because the flesh was pushed over. Um, Now she looks pretty good. Um, but the bone in her face that was cracked, it came off. It was cracked off. So there's a section on her face that, let me see if I can show you guys, if I can get the camera to focus. I don't know if I'm going to be able to. Well, her face looks a little crooked from the front because of that missing bone, and it's a really bad vulnerability. If anyone ever picked a fight with her again and pecked that area, they could damage her sinuses, maybe her brain. It could be lethal. So we decided we're not going to release her. We spent all this time nursing her back to health, and she could die in her very first fight. So she permanently lives with us. Her flock is also the same one that Steve came from, who was the bird that I released at the same time that I tried to release Bob, and Bob wanted to stay. He was also a scorpion sting victim who was frozen up like a burrito, and took about a month to loosen back up. Goldie has decided that she loves Chiffon here. Chiffon came from original Shiloh's flock, the one that baby Shiloh is named for. Chiffon had like a crooked scissor beak and like a bone protrusion that from her, I don't know, in her throat or something. We think that she was like, she ran into a window maybe and it broke a bone. I'm sorry, I can't get this to focus very well. So she couldn't eat on her own, and she went to the Shiloh flock's mom, and just like Luna, collapsed on her doorstep, weak and emaciated. So I took her in, and she was very hand tame for a long time, even after her mouth and her throat healed up. I used to take her out, hold her, and give her pets like all the time. She lived in the pidge room, actually, from the other video that I showed you. Uh, Rusty used to live in this cage. When Rusty went to Phoenix, I decided to try moving Chiffon in here because Rusty was Goldie's kind of friend. I didn't want Goldie to get lonely. And I don't know, Chiffon may be a boy. These two have bonded. Um, Goldie has been laying eggs like regularly. She's very fond of Shiffy over here. Shiffy is obviously very fond of Goldie. When I try to hold Chiffon and pet her, she will not have it now. It's possible Chiffon is a guy. I'm not sure. The reason they don't live in a cage together is, believe it or not, when I put them in any cage, whether I put Chiffon in here or Goldie in here, Goldie attacked Chiffon. I think it's a case of, I don't know, just she's very territorial. So I give them out time and let them fly around the bedroom. They usually like to hang up here and just be next to each other. It's really weird. They're good when they're out together, but they can't be in a cage together. And Chiffon doesn't fight back. She just, she would get really messed up by Goldie and can't have that. So, yeah. Um, Chiffon would probably be releasable except for the fact that she's bonded to Goldie. um, these two, I'll tell you their stories in a minute, but they have a similar issue. They are mates, like full on mates. When I let them out, they copulate. Um, but if I put him in her cage or her in his cage, this one attacks her. Seems to have the same issue as Goldie. Anyway, this is Kalamata. As you can see, his left eye is gone. His right eye is intact, but he's facing away from me. He was brought to me in 2022. I believe somebody shot him while he was flying with a BB gun. And then he fell to the ground and broke his wing. So he came to us with a broken wing. He can't fly. It's healed up. It looks pretty straight, but he can't raise it beyond a certain point, so he can't really fly. The BB was in his left side. Believe it or not, the BB didn't hit the eye, but it got lodged in his cheek. And so when we examined him, we didn't even know that there was a BB in there. We were looking him over, looked over his eye. We thought maybe a hawk had gotten him, just like Silk and Odin. But then we found this BB lodged in his cheek. And what had happened is it had been in there so long that infection started building up. And the infection with pigeons, normal infections like what you and I would get from a skin wound, not a cat wound infections will kill them really quick, but free radical infections in an open wound, their bodies solidify it as a defense so it doesn't spread and kill them. And that did save his life, but that solid buildup of infection started pressing on his left eye, and it was half drained or almost all. I can't remember now, but it was, yeah, basically it looked like the infection block had squeezed his eye and burst it and destroyed it. So we pulled the BB out of his cheek, got the infected mass out, bandaged his wing, and the cheek healed up, and yeah, he actually was found on someone's doorstep. He was really messed up from not getting food, from probably hitting his head and his wing when he fell, and dragged himself to someone's doorstep to ask for help. He could barely stand back then. That's how determined these guys are to live. Before we got her name is Echo. That same year that we got Kala, I got in an ill-fated pigeon named Freddie, who I still miss that year. He ate a little bit of poison, Freddie did, and the person who posted about him didn't know at the time, so she just said that there was a pigeon by her pool that she was taking care of, but didn't seem to want to fly, and nobody else went out there. So after a couple days, I went out there, and I found that he had a slight, very slight head tremor. Um, he had ingested a tiny bit of neural poison, which is typical of pest control places. Um, Normally, it kills them if you don't give them activated charcoal in time, which obviously he didn't get it in time. But it wasn't too much. So we had this permanent head tremor. I thought, okay, he's alive, but and he became Kala's good friend, and Kala really loved him a lot. They hung out in our living room a lot. But 3 months later, Freddie got a very quick growing tumor in his throat. We think from the poison that he survived initially, and it ended up there was no way to safely get it out, and it choked him to death one night. So Kala didn't have her good friend. I say her because we thought Kala was a girl for a long time. Kala also had a friend named Beaker that we got later, I think early in 2023. Beaker also, we didn't realize, had some kind of cancer. Um, we brought him, he was emaciated, he had a cracked beak for some reason, which is why we named him Beaker. And he lived with us for a year, and Kala really loved Beaker a lot, and they cuddled a lot in our living room. But about a year after we got him, Beaker started getting weaker and weaker and weaker, and I was giving him high nutrient food and medicine, and I couldn't figure out what it was. We still don't know for sure. We figure maybe he had some kind of tumor internally, and if he had, I mean, the kind of operation to get a tumor outside of a bird this size, from their organs, it's very risky, and so he passed, and Kala again lost another really close friend who he loved, and then Echo came along not long after that, and Echo lost a leg. It was mangled when we got her. It was like both of Kiwi's legs when I first got Kiwi. Necrotic, really bad. It had to come off. She still has half of her thigh left. But she has one leg, but she couldn't push off well enough to fly very quickly to get away from predators, so we ended up keeping her, and she ended up becoming mates with Kalamata. They started, for lack of a better word, we found them effing in the hallway one day, and Kala was on top, and then Echo laid eggs, and we were like, oh, I guess Kala's a boy. So that's why I still sometimes slip and call Kala she and her, because I called him that for like 2 years. Um, so I told you why they live in separate cages. I also don't, they're friendly outside, but I try not to let them outside too much because whenever Echo lays eggs, the way her body is, I guess it presses on the nerves of her remaining leg, and it gets really numb for like 3 days straight, and she can't stand on it very well. She can barely get around, so I try to keep them separated, which really sucks. She lays infertile eggs like these sometimes, just by hormones, but it's very few and far between. If they were able to F a lot and she was laying eggs regularly, I worry that it could cause permanent nerve damage to her only leg, and she'd end up like Kiwi. So, anyway, those are the bedroom pigeons.